Rise to lend a few words of support to this particular bill. Because, Mr. Speaker, I think that it is legislation, the time for which has come. And it is legislation which I feel, once enacted here, we hope with the unanimous support of this House, and once enacted throughout the OECS region, will bring much needed relief. I have sat and I've listened both to the mover and to the honourable member from number 10 in relation to their support for this bill. I think a comprehensive case has been made, and that is why I believe I can be brief. I want our people to appreciate that sometimes we need to be protected from ourselves. I know in the past, Mr. Speaker, when we introduced seatbelt laws, some people said that they felt more comfortable driving without the seatbelt, and that government should not tell them how they ought to drive their own car. But I think the research has suggested that wearing a seatbelt makes you safer. And part of what our role must be as a government is to seek to provide the necessary leadership and the necessary guidance to assist our people in doing the right thing. Mr. Speaker, this issue of debt, credit, and the like is a vexing issue. We recognize that debt is something that all of us have. Countries have it, individuals have it. But it is necessary, Mr. Speaker, that we have manageable debt. And I hark to what both speakers before me have said, because it is incumbent upon our people to understand that it is not everything you see that you must put yourself in debt to acquire. It is not every day that you must seek to acquire, and by so doing put yourself in debt. Some things can be deferred until you are in a better position to acquire them. And as I listen particularly to the member from number 10, who is full of wisdom and who has the experience to speak, I believe, eloquently as he has done to such matters, I want our people to pay keen attention. The naysayers may well say that this is somehow an effort, Mr. Speaker, to get at people, and I have had in my own capacity, in my public and private life, people coming to me and saying, I went by so-and-so to borrow and I was turned down. And the usual statements, they don't like me, or they don't like my family. And you hear a lot of these statements. And I have had occasion to say to one or two, the people did you a favor. By turning you down, the people did you a favor. I know people don't like to hear that, because we have now a culture of instant gratification. And if you want the furniture, you want the fridge, you want the stove, you want it now, not next week, not next year, not wait for the sale, you want it now. And I believe that we have a responsibility to say to our people that we must be responsible. And responsible behavior demands that we conduct ourselves in such a way, Mr. Speaker, that we don't create trauma for ourselves and our family going forward. It is very important, I feel, therefore, that this legislation has come at a time like this, because as has been carefully laid out, it provides now an infrastructure, a framework, if you will, that credit and credit scores can be determined, so that if I were to go into any bank or other institution to seek to get credit, whether for goods or otherwise, that there now is a mechanism where people can be objectively assessed. And we move away from this notion that some people have, that people don't like them or people are trying to get at them. Sometimes, as I've said before, when credit is denied, they actually do in your favor. But Mr. Speaker, it speaks to a broader sense in our society, in our community, of our people being responsible. And our people must be responsible in every sense. I am aware, for example, of an occasion where a young lady wanting to buy something but whose income could not sustain that which she desired, got a letter from someone purporting to say that she was employed to that someone part-time at a certain income, which she then used and took to the lender to say, listen, I have my regular job paying me X and a part-time job paying me Y. So therefore I'm qualified. When there was in fact no part-time job and no additional income. And of course, the inevitable happened. You will run yourself into difficulty. Because yes, you get the TV or you get the stove today. But what happens in a month or 2 months or 3 months' time? And that is symptomatic in my view. And an indication of the extent to which sometimes people would go in this need to have it now and to enjoy it now. And there's no sense of deferred satisfaction. I think that's the language that the Honourable Member from number 10 used. And all of this goes back to the societal norms which we used to have, and which it seems, Mr. Speaker, to some extent we have lost, of our people being responsible. When you were growing up, your grandmother told you so. You don't spend what you don't have. You must learn to save something. And sometimes you wonder where your grandmother get it from when she push her hand down inside her bosom and take out something. But the reality was that even in those days, when things were far worse than they are today, when people had far less at their disposal, we were responsible. Thrift, prudence, good sense. We ought not to lose sight of those, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just want to use a few examples because, as I said, in this role that we all occupy, all of us in this house, we have to exercise leadership and exercise guidance and good sense and try to encourage our people to do likewise. I must point out that sometimes we're in a job today, we have income, but we must make provision for eventualities. We might become ill, Mr. Speaker, or a member of family might become ill. And so what you thought was disposable income, suddenly you have to use to take care of that. We might suffer job losses, or especially for those, many of whom in our country work in the hospitality industry, in the off-season you have fewer hours, you have a reduced income. And I often say to people when they say, oh, it's September, October, and my service charge, or whatever it is at the hotel is not that good. I say to them, well, you know, in December and January, try to save a little something. Because you must understand, because of the seasonality of the industry in which you're engaged, that from time to time, there will be less available by way of income. But what I've realized, you know, Mr. Speaker, our people, some of them don't like to hear those things, you know. When you say certain things to certain people, they get vexed with you. I got a call just recently, and the person said to me that when they had done all the deductions from quotes, I think they mentioned, and something from TDC and something else, for all that they had taken from their monthly pay, they had $120 left. Now, how can you survive on $120? When you have food, transportation, and the potential, as I said, as all of us have the potential for somebody to become ill. So these are decisions I think that our people need to make, and sometimes those of us in leadership positions must tell our people the truth. Not encourage them to go and get a house when we know they cannot afford a house. Not encourage them to get a car. Some of them go on the internet and they order a car because it looks cheap. But by the time you add the shipping, you add the duty, you add the environmental levy, you come here and you haven't even put in anything yet for gas. And the fact that the car will require tires after a while. And you must take it to the mechanic. And as I said, these perhaps are not things that people want to hear, but they're things that people must hear. And before I sit, I want to mention one other thing. And again, these come from my own personal experiences in the community. A young man approached me some time ago, Mr. Speaker, and he said he had a problem. The bailiff was looking for him because he had not paid his child support. Now, I am very sensitive to that because I always think that the children must be taken care of. But I took the opportunity to have a conversation with the young man. And you could imagine my astonishment, Mr. Speaker, when I asked the question of him. Turns out he says he has 6 children from 6 different women. 6 children from 6 different women. But I must help him because the bailiff looking for him because he can't pay child support. I can't say in this house what I said to him because I believe that might be unparliamentary. But I use the opportunity to encourage him and to say to him, listen, that is not responsible behavior. That is not responsible behavior. Because if you're going to have 6 children with 6 different ladies, and each of those has a court order against you for child support, tells me that you're in serious difficulty. I don't know whether or not he heeded what I had to say, but I think it's important that when we're confronted with these situations, we use them as an opportunity to help and to guide. And that is something that I have always thought of, because I myself couldn't imagine what it must be like to be under that kind of pressure in terms of maintaining that number of children, disparate as they are, from different mothers across the community. So, what do I say? I say this, Mr. Speaker, that we must start by exercising responsibility for our own selves, our own actions, and through that responsibility, I feel that we will be better off as a society and as a community. This bill is designed, in my opinion, to ensure that those amongst us who might tend to be irresponsible financially might have now a bit of a tether on them to prevent them from so doing. Mr. President, before I sit, however, I want to raise one last point. Because much of what we have said today has focused on individual responsibility. And we have said that our people must exercise personal responsibility and financial prudence when dealing with their own affairs. But I can't sit without also expressing a word to our business houses, because it's a two-way street. Our credit houses, our business houses themselves, Mr. Speaker, must exercise responsibility. Because I am persuaded from some of the cases that I have seen that some of them who say pay $1 down and pay $9.99 a week or whatever, they well know that the individual before them can't afford it. They know. But yet they do it. Because what then happens, Mr. Speaker, is we find ourselves in a situation where an individual goes and, as the Honorable Member for number 10 says, most of us can afford $1 or $10 or whatever the down payment may be. So we pay it and we get the instant gratification of having the truck roll around and bring our washing machine or our 40-inch television or whatever it is we say we need. But then the weekly payments, sometimes with interest rates, which are astronomical, that then kicks in. And that's where the trouble starts. So we run into a little difficulty. The little job we had, we get laid off. A member becomes sick or we become sick, whatever the circumstance may be, that changes. And all of a sudden we can't make the payment. Well, the interest and the payment, that keeps adding. Next thing you hear, the same truck that bring the TV come back to take it back. So the TV gone back, but guess what? You still have liability for the debt. Next thing you get lawyer letter. And you're going down to the magistrate's court in Bastia, in Sandy Point, in Charleston, wherever it may be. And you're now hearing at the magistrate's court that you owe X amount plus lawyer fee. The other member from number 11 is here. He knows about the lawyer fees very well. That's what you start to hear. And then the magistrate tell you, what might have been a debt of $300, you're shocked that you owe $1,200 by the time the magistrate finished with you. And then guess what happens, Mr. Speaker? If you couldn't find 300, you're going to find 12. So you can't find the 1,200, you then get a little something from the lawyer that said JDS, Judgment Debtor Summons. With that JDS now, you're going back to court. Now for 1,200 because that's the judgment. And the judge tell you, well, pay the 1,200 within X amount of time, and you know something, pay another $500 in costs on top of that. So what started out as 300 is now 1,700. You couldn't pay 3. You couldn't pay 12. You now owe 1,700, but here's the kicker. They say if you don't pay, then you go to Her Majesty's prison for 7 days or 14 days or how many ever days in what we have called debtor's prison. So a lot of poor people, Mr. Speaker, have found themselves in these unfortunate situations. And the thing about this debtor's jail, you know, is when they go to debtor's jail for the $1,700 and they spend the 7 days at Her Majesty's pleasure, when they come out they still owe it, you know.
And the item gone.
Or the item repossessed long time. They still owe the money. So the time spent at what you call it 1840 has not erased the debt. So our people out there need, Mr. Speaker, to understand that the habit, the culture, the appetite that has developed for instantaneous gratification, they have to control that. But the commercial houses have a part to play as well. In my effort to prepare for today, I did a little research. I found an article. The reason I want to make reference to it, this is an article dated 1937. So I use that just to show how long this problem has existed. Something by Francis Gower. But here's a bit that I want to quote, Mr. Speaker. It says this: a system which enables a man to obtain the use of goods which it is impossible or inconvenient for him to pay for in a lump sum, but for which he can quite well find small monthly contributions, affords in principle, and not infrequently in practice, welcome and desirable assistance to people of limited means. But the abuses to which it lends itself, and which are far too common, are having a deplorable effect upon a wide range of unbusinesslike and simple people throughout the country. Unbusinesslike and simple because the hire purchase system is one which too often thrives upon the exploitation and unfamiliarity with business methods. See, a lot of times, Mr. Speaker, when we go to the stores, all we see is the big sign, you know, which says nothing down or $10 down. Dollar down, that's what I'm hearing in the back here. That's what we see, because that is the advertisement that is put up. $0 down, $1 down. And hear what the post in 1937 is saying? Whilst it can afford a benefit to people of limited means, it is often abused. And I believe that the business houses themselves have a responsibility. And what this legislation is seeking to do, and my understanding of it, is that now with the credit scores and the credit bureau, the business houses themselves will now have an obligation, Mr. Speaker, to do the proper due diligence, to inform themselves. And if having informed themselves, they assume the risk, then they assume the risk. But the notion that now obtains, where they are quick to say, anybody who comes, I will give them the TV or the stove or the washing machine, because they well know that the interest rate is high, some may argue exorbitant, the conditions are onerous, that they have a right to repossess, still a right to sue for their money, and the dreaded debtor's jail if the people can't pay. They know that now. So they have no incentive, in my respectful view, to do better. But we, from this house, and from every rostrum that we are afforded an opportunity to speak must call not only on our residents and citizens, but on everybody, including our business community, to be responsible. Because it cannot be a good thing, Mr. Speaker, for our people, particularly those of limited means, those whom we refer to in a broad way as poor people. Cannot be a good thing for them to be preyed upon. When I did my research, there was a language that I studied, they call it predatory lending. Predatory lending. So people are being preyed upon. You give them something, you say, look how shiny it is, it's glittering. When there are very real consequences for them down the line. And so, Mr. Speaker, I believe in the fullness of time, the Honorable Prime Minister will speak to efforts at reform in relation to those matters such as debtors' jail and the like, which have been with us since colonial times. But this is an important cog in that wheel. This is an important piece of legislation, an important strand, if you will, in the tapestry that we are weaving in this country to make it better for our people. And it is high time that our people be more responsible, but it is equally high time for our business houses to have more responsible business practices. And when they know that people cannot afford, they ought not to encourage people to put themselves in debt where there's no upside, but only downside for our people. And so, Mr. Speaker, I would want with those words to lend my full support to this legislation, to commend the move of the bill for bringing it at a time like this, because I believe it will provide genuine relief for people along the length and breadth of this, our beloved country. With those words, therefore, I shall sit, but shall wish this bill safe passage to this honorable House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Stay up to date with news, programs, and activities of the government with SKNIS. Like us on Facebook. Listen to us on SoundCloud. Follow us on Twitter. And watch our videos on YouTube. Connect with us today. SKNIS, St. Kitts and Nevis Information Service.